Amen. Good morning, Peace Chapel. Can we give it up for the praise team? Amen. That was some awesome worship. And I was blown away by yesterday. That event yesterday, the women did a wonderful job with that event. I'm talking about a powerful event. If you were anywhere close to 7622 South Avalon, you felt the power. And speaking of power, my wife, my goodness, that's a powerful woman. Let me just tell you guys real briefly. On August the 3rd, 2019, the Lord's favor shined upon me when I met Aikisha. And the original thought behind the women's tea was to give the women of Peace Chapel the opportunity to meet my wife so you guys can see just how beautiful she is. Because this church is important to me. She's important to me. And I need the two that are important to me to come together and see just how important both sides are to me. And you guys had an opportunity to see that. And over the years, this event has just begun to grow and grow. And I'm just excited about what God is doing and where God is taking our women's ministry. We love women here at Peace Chapel. We love our women's ministry. In fact, I was thinking about this morning that our church needs to be a safe place for women and children. That we have to make this a safe place for women and children. In fact, I would like for this to be the safest place on the planet for women and children. And so I just thank God for the men that showed up yesterday, and we have our women's back. And one man that I just want to point out, this brother right here is just off the chain with it. I love him, I admire him, and that's Brother David. David goes hard for this church. Come on, y'all can do better than that. David goes hard for this church. I'm telling you, you give me 2 or 3 Davids and I'll go to battle against anybody. That brother is a soldier and he's serious about the Lord. He's serious about his wife and he's serious about this church. Yesterday, they played this game, and in the game, you couldn't say the word T. You couldn't say the word T in the game, and I was like challenged in my mind to understand how anybody would say the word T, because if you say the word T, you're going to lose. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, if I got to go an hour or so and not say the word T, I can surely do that. But there was competition involved. And so there were people that were trying to get other people to say the word T, because if they could get them to say the word T, then they could get their hats. And people got real crafty with that. I don't want to say no names, but there was somebody in here that came up with a strategy to get people to spell words that have T in it. And people were falling for it. I heard one woman, she said she spelled a word that had T in it, and the person that was doing it said, aha, I got you. She said it wasn't that T. She was smart enough not to fall for it. But I was just blown away by how people were involved and people kept falling for it, because at the end of the day, to not lose, all you had to do was just not say T. That's it. Just don't say T and you will not lose. And then I started thinking, I said, well, that's not difficult for me. But there are some things that are difficult for me. Like there are some things that I have a challenge with it when it comes to not doing it. Like, for example, I know that I shouldn't overindulge with French fries. But I do it anyway. I know I shouldn't overindulge with social media, but sometimes I do it anyway. And just like me and just like the people that were involved with the game, we all do things that we should not do. We know we shouldn't do it, but we do it anyway. And your thing might not be my thing, and my thing might not be your thing, but we all have a thing. We all have those things that we know that we should not do. We do it anyway. Now, I'll get back to that shortly, but we are in the fourth part of a message series that we're calling Happiness. And in this message series, we're exploring happiness because all of us want to be happy. And I want to pastor a church full of happy people. I want my family to be happy. I want my wife to be happy. And so it's important that we discover what it is that makes us happy. And in week one, what we determined was that there is no thing that makes us happy. That when it comes to being happy, there is no thing that makes us happy because things don't lead to happiness. That happy what always leads to happy what else. That if we get caught up in trying to be happy when it comes to going after things, then we'll fall short. We won't be happy. And so no things make you happy. There's a difference between feeling happy and being happy. See, some of us get caught up in the feeling of being happy. Feeling happy describes your mood at a single point. That, for example, if you get some new shoes, your new shoes might make you feel happy. If you get a new car might make you feel happy. But if something happens to your shoes, if something happens to your car, then there goes your happiness. But when it comes to being happy describes a trend of feeling happiness over time. That being happy is lasting happiness, right? It's not temporary. It's not depending upon conditions or elements. It's not depending upon seasons. That it's something that is more lasting. It can handle the changes in circumstances. Being happy is related to several factors, including your confidence level, your mental health, and resilience to changes in your environment. That your environment can change, but it doesn't mean that you have to lose your happiness. That when you have lasting happiness, your environment and circumstances don't necessarily impact that happiness. And then in week 2, we looked at another aspect of our happiness, and that is sowing in the right direction. That we need to take control of our happiness, that we don't want to put our happiness in the hands of other people, that we can be happy and that happiness is an outcome, that I need to choose to go in a certain direction if I want to be happy. That I am happy when I arrive at my intended destination. That if I say in my mind that I want to lose 10 pounds and I start moving towards losing 10 pounds, I can be happy when I lose 1 pound. I can be happy when I lose 2. I can be happy when I lose 7 because I'm going in the right direction. But if I start going in the other direction and I say I want to lose 10 pounds and I gain 3, I'm not going to be happy because I'm not sowing in the right direction. Happiness is directional. And so if you say to me that you want to be happy, then I'm going to ask you this question. Do you have something to sow for it. That it's up to you, that your happiness is up to you. It's all about the decisions that you make. And then last week we looked at the third aspect of happiness, and that is grown-up faith. That if you want to be happy, you have to toughen up a little bit. That life happens, that things are not always going to go the way that you want them to go. In fact, God uses adversity to strengthen us, to complete what is lacking in us. And so if we want to be happy, we have to go through things. And as we go through things and we learn to trust God and God shows up for us as we're going through things, what happens is our faith begins to mature. Our faith begins to grow. Because we learn that if I can trust God with this problem, if He showed up for me with this problem, He'll show up for me with the next problem. That's how David was able to defeat Goliath, because David recognized that the same God who saw him when the bears and the lions tried to attack the sheep was the same God that would see him get past this great giant. And so today we're going to go a little deeper. Today we're going to explore happiness a little more. You guys have heard me say that it's important for us to discover what it is that breaks our hearts. Because if we can discover what breaks our hearts, that's what will lead us to our passion. There aren't many things that break my heart more than watching people that I love, people that I care about, do things that undermine their own happiness. Watching people crash and burn breaks my heart. Some people enjoy it. Some people like watching people suffer. Some people like watching people destroy their own lives, but I don't like watching people crash and burn. Watching people make moves that you know is not going to end well for them. Watching people make moves that's going to land them in a place that they don't want to be. That breaks my heart. And this is something that we all have in common. You guys have heard the saying that I'm my own worst enemy. That I am my own worst enemy. You are your own worst enemy. And you say, how do I know that you are your own worst enemy? Think about your last bad relationship. Who was there? You were. Think about your last financial disaster. Who was there? You were. Think about the last time you ended up in jail. Guess who was in that cell with you? You were. You keep following yourself around. You keep popping up everywhere you go. It's like you can't get rid of you. You are always there. You are your own worst enemy. And I know it's convenient for us, especially us Christians, to blame other people, namely Satan, for every bad thing that happens in our lives. But if we're honest with ourselves, you bought it, right? And not only that, you leased it, right? I can keep going. You ate it. That's not it. You drank it. And you dated it. You smoked it, you dated it. And some of you even went further than that. You married it. Every disaster you've had in your life, you were there. It was like you were the mastermind. But why? Why do we do things that undermine our own happiness? Why do we sabotage our own success? Here's what I believe is the reason. I believe it's confusion around these two words right here, pleasure and happiness. Pleasure and happiness. And so for this message, we're going to focus on these two words right here, pleasure and happiness. And to get us there, we're going to look at some words from Jesus. These are very familiar words. For many of you, Jesus is talking to a crowd of people, and he wants them to comprehend something that he's saying, and he makes a statement that sets us up for where we are going today. Here's what he says. He says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Who is this thief that Jesus is talking about that comes only to kill, to steal, and to destroy? Some people say it's the devil. And it could be the devil. I'm not going to deny that the devil exists. The devil exists. He's the number one culprit when it comes to evil in the world. But we as Christians have more than the devil as our enemy. We have the world, this world system that is anti-God, this world system that says, I don't need God, I can make it without God. And then there's another enemy besides the devil. And this is a very important enemy that we need to give some attention to, and that is our flesh. That unredeemed part of us. That part of us that says T, even though we know we lose when we say T. That part of us that overindulges with French fries, even though that's bad for us. That's the real enemy. The real enemy is the person that I see when I look in the mirror. It's not always Satan. Satan is not everywhere at the same time. He's not omnipresent like God. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think I'm that important for Satan to just like focus on me, right? I mean, like he has other things in place to affect me where he doesn't need to focus on me. He's probably focusing on more important people, like people that have the power to run countries and people that have the power to send nuclear bombs to other countries. But when it comes to me, he uses the world system and he uses my flesh. Who is it that is the thief in my life? The thief is anything or anyone that kills, steals, or destroys. Anything that disrupts my peace is a thief. Anything that robs me of my joy is a thief. Anything that's taking things from me that I need, valuable things, killing relationships in my life, that's a thief. Anything that causes me to be at odds with people that I love, people that I need to work with, that is a thief. anything that causes me to use my body in a way that harms me, that is a thief. I know you want to blame the devil, but I'm my own worst enemy. Remember? You bought it. You leased it. You ate it. You drank it. You smoked it. And you dated it. So who's the real thief in your life? See, we have to figure this out. If we don't figure this out, we will never have lasting happiness. We'll blame our parents for all the wrong in our lives. If my daddy would have just, if my mama would have just, we'll blame our exes for all the wrong in my life, in our lives. If he would have just, if she would have just. But it keeps happening from relationship to relationship. The common denominator is you. You are the thief in your own life. And so Jesus says the thief comes only to kill and steal and destroy. He says, in contrast to that, he says, I have come that you might have life. And I want you guys to think about life in the context of happiness, because Jesus adds something to that. He says, I have come that you might have life, and then he says, and have it to the full. Some translations say, have it more abundantly. Jesus is saying that I have come to show you a different way to live. A way to live that will lead to lasting happiness. He says, life to the full. To the full means an extraordinary life. I can't stand to see Christians living ordinary lives. God didn't call us to be ordinary. God didn't call us to fit in. God called us to stand out. God called us to live a supernatural, extraordinary life, because when we live supernatural, extraordinary lives, it shows that His power is at work in us. That life is so attractive. It's so attractive that those who are outside of our community look at the way that we live and they say, I want some of what she has. Whatever he has, whatever's behind the way that he is living, I want that in my life. And then Jesus turns the corner. He says, I am the good shepherd. And for us, we don't know, like a shepherd, what does that mean to us? What is a shepherd? But to his audience, they understood exactly what he was talking about. They're like, okay, now you have my attention. Because many of them were shepherds. And they had the responsibility of caring for sheep, leading sheep. And sheep are prone to go astray. Sheep are prone to do dumb things, to do stupid things. And you say, well, I don't want to be referred to a sheep. But remember, you bought it. Remember that? You leased it. You dated it. You married it. And so just like sheep do dumb things, we do dumb things too. But then Jesus says, he says, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Anywhere you look in the Bible, whether it's the Old Testament or the New Testament, it's all about Jesus laying down his life for his followers. Anybody that lays down their life for you is for you. I want my daughter to marry a man who is willing to lay down his life for her. You want to be connected to people who are willing to lay down their lives for you. And so Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and I lay down my life for the sheep so that they can live this extraordinary life. And we want it, right? We come to church because we want it. We read our Bibles because we want it. We pray because we want it. And it seems like we're going towards it, and then it just seems like it runs away from us. It's not running away from you, you're running away from it. There is something that continues to get in the way of you experiencing this extraordinary life that God has for you, that God has for every one of His children, every follower of Jesus. It is available to all of us, but something keeps getting in the way, and that is sin. Sin continues to get in the way of you experiencing the life that God has for you, and you keep having these moments of happiness because you're pursuing pleasure. You get pleasure, you're pleased, and you have these moments of happiness because you get new things, and you have these moments of happiness. You get a compliment, you have these moments of happiness, but then it seems like it runs away from you. That's sin. Sin keeps getting in the way. A simple definition of sin is things that we do that harm us or harm other people. And like we said in week 1, sin separates. Sin creates division. If sin is in the way, sin is going to separate. Sin is going to separate you from God. It's going to separate you from others. And it's going to separate you from your own self. You've heard people say, I can't live with myself. It's because of things that they've done that has caused separation between them and God and other people. And people who can't live with themselves ultimately end up killing themselves. And so we can say it this way: sin comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Sin often comes disguised as pleasure. And the reason why sin can disguise itself as pleasure is because there's nothing wrong with pleasure. That God created us with the capacity to experience pleasure. But when pleasure pulls us away from happiness, when pleasure undermines our happiness, pleasure is a problem. See, when we pursue pleasure, ultimately pleasure will undermine our happiness. And so if there's nothing wrong with pleasure, that God has created us with the capacity to experience pleasure, and there's nothing wrong with happiness, then how should we approach this? We have to flip it. We need to make sure that we prioritize happiness over pleasure. See, when we prioritize happiness over pleasure, and we've talked about the principles for happiness, we're not talking about the happy feeling, we're talking about real lasting happiness. When we prioritize happiness over pleasure, it will lead to pleasure. But when you prioritize pleasure over happiness, it will undermine your happiness. Another way put, eventually, pleasure loses its pleasure and becomes a prison. You guys know what I'm talking about. Remember, it used to be one hit. But now you need more to get there. It used to be like I can look at porn for a couple of minutes and I could get there, but now you need more and more porn, and now the pleasure has become a prison. You know what I'm talking about. You used to could spend, I used to smoke weed, so I know a little something about this. I wasn't much of a drinker, but I used to smoke weed until my eyes bleed. I love weed. And here's what I noticed about weed. Before, when I first started, I could take 1 or 2 puffs, and I was there. And then over time, it was a blunt. Couple of blunts a day, and we're not even calculating, right? Like, we're not even keeping track of how much we're spending on this, right? Because now it's been leaped over into my finances, right? And so now I'm spending more money on this, and I'm like, where's the money at to pay my cell phone bill? I'm short on the money to pay my cell phone bill. And now I need it to cope with life, right? Because when I smoke it, it seems to make life easier. Pleasure has become a prison. I put it above my happiness, and now pleasure has become a prison. Paul talks about this in his letter to the Roman church. One of the things I love about Paul is he would take the words of Jesus, the message of Jesus, and he tease it out in a way where all of us could understand. And he does that when it comes to this whole thing of pleasure over happiness. And he says this in Romans chapter 6, verse 16. He starts it off this way. He says, "Don't you know?" And when Paul is saying, when he talks like this, "Don't you know?" that's like saying, duh. You should already know this. And here's what he's saying we should already know. He says, don't you know that when you offer yourselves, don't miss this, when you offer yourselves to someone or something as obedient slaves, watch this, you are slaves of the one or the thing that you obey. Offer as in, here I am, you are now my master. And you say, I don't talk like that. My mind doesn't go like that. But whatever you offer yourself to as obedient, that is your master. If you offer yourself as obedient to alcohol, alcohol becomes your master. If you offer yourself as obedient, if you say yes to meth, meth is your master. If you say yes to porn, porn is your master. If you say yes to sex, sex is your master. Now let me say something about sex. Here's the thing. God created sex. And sex is pleasurable. God gave us the capacity to enjoy sex. We can enjoy sex the world's way, our way, or God's way. When we enjoy sex the world's way, it leads to temporary pleasure that ultimately becomes a prison. But when we enjoy sex God's way, it leads to lasting pleasure, lasting happiness. I know because I've been on both sides. I know what it's like to give in to my impulses and my desires in the area of sex. But I also know what it's like to be involved with someone that I'm building with, someone that I've made a commitment to, that we have decided that we're going to build together, we're going to stay together, we support one another. I'm all yours, you're all mine. That's a different level of pleasure. That's pleasure without having to look over your shoulders. That's pleasure without guilt. When we don't go to sleep when we know we should go to sleep, we are offering ourselves as slaves to that which we obey. When we eat things that we know we shouldn't eat, we're offering ourselves as slaves to that which we obey. So the key here is we have to prioritize our happiness over pleasure. And so Paul puts it this way. He says, whether you are slaves to sin, look, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. When I say yes to the flesh becomes my master. When I say yes to sin, sin becomes my master. But when I say yes to God, when I say yes to righteousness, God becomes my master. And every time we say yes to God, we are strengthening the foundation of our lives. You don't want to build a house that is built on sand. When you build a house that is built on sand, the elements, the environment, the circumstances will test the quality of what you have built. And if it's not built on a solid foundation, it's coming down. And you're going to have to start all over again. And before you know it, you're 35 years old doing things you should have did when you were 19. You keep saying yes to the wrong things. There's nothing wrong with pleasure. But you cannot prioritize pleasure over your happiness. And so here's how it works. When we say yes to God, we're no longer enemies of God. When we say no to God, it puts us at odds with God. And if you're at odds with God, you will not win that battle. Satan will make you think you can because you have these happy moments. Satan will make you think you can because you see other people who have not prioritized God, who's not listening to God, and it seems like they're living good. But I'm telling you what I know based on experience, if you are at war with God, you are not going to win that battle. But the moment you decide to surrender, and you make up your mind that I'm going to be a slave anyway. I choose to be a slave to God. The moment you make up your mind that you are going to obey God, you are now at peace with God. And here's how it flows. Peace with God paves the way to peace with ourselves. And that prepares us to make peace with others. You will never be happy as long as you are at odds with God. You're not going to be happy with yourself. And if you're not happy with yourself, you're never going to be happy with other people. Can you imagine being married to someone who is at war with themselves? Can you imagine working for someone who is at war with themselves? It's happening all the time. It's happening all over the place. You cannot be at peace with yourself or others if you're not at peace with God. You cannot be at peace with others if you're not at peace with yourself and you're not at peace with God. And so in conclusion, what would Jesus tell you? When it comes to your happiness, Jesus will tell you sow better, to reap better, to feel better. To close out this message, I want to get personal. I want you to get personal with yourself. And this is where you got to be honest with yourself. You don't need to answer this out loud, but you need to be honest with yourself. If you cannot be honest with yourself, you'll never be honest with other people. The easiest person for me to deceive is me. The easiest person for me to deceive is the person in the mirror. And so here's that personal question that you need to wrestle with, that you need to be honest about. Is there a pleasure that's undermining your happiness? And I don't want you to think about this in terms of sin, because this is how we miss things. It might not even be sinful. It's just irresponsible. It's just something that you know you shouldn't do. Your priorities, you just don't have your priorities together. You're a parent now. You shouldn't be acting like that. You're an adult now. You should not be acting like that. You're a professional now. You shouldn't be acting like that. There are certain ways that you need to be carrying yourself. You should not be acting like that. You should not be doing that. And you know deep down inside that if you keep going down this path, it's going to cause you to land in a place that you don't want to be. Is there a pleasure that's undermining your happiness? Another way put, is there a pleasure that's slowly taking you to prison? See, this is the dangerous form of pleasure, because it doesn't get you there fast. And you think that you're getting away with it. And before you know it, you're hooked. You can't seem to get him out of your system. No matter how far you move away from him, no matter how far you move away from her, you just can't seem to get them out of your system. You slowly worked your way into prison. And now you're hooked. It's a soul tie. You thought that you had control over it. But now it is controlling you. Don't play with this. This is not anything to play with. I'm telling you this based on experience. God wants you to be happy. I want you to be happy. Stop playing with this thing. Sin is dangerous. Sin will take you further than you want to go. Keep you longer than you want to stay, and charge you more than you're willing to pay. And so you got to remind yourself, this is serious. Don't say T. You know that saying T is going to disqualify you. Don't say T. You got to prioritize happiness over pleasure. Because when you prioritize pleasure over happiness, it will undermine your happiness. And so in conclusion, what makes you happy? Having your priorities straight. And so I want to invite you down to the altar. And as I was speaking today, I believe the Spirit of God was speaking to you. And He was pointing out certain things that you're doing that is to your detriment. I want everybody to stand up. And if you feel compelled, I want you to come down to the altar and I want you to give it to God. Don't let this thing become a prison. There's nothing wrong with pleasure. But if you put pleasure above your happiness, you will end up in prison. So I want to invite you down to the altar, and I want you to bring it to the altar and leave it here. God is able. He loves you more than the world. He loves you more than the homies. He loves you more than you love yourself. God's commands are not to ruin your fun, not to ruin your pleasure. God's commands are designed to enhance your pleasure. Bring it to the altar.